A lot of recent pop culture incidents have shown me that many of us still don't understand what consent is and how misunderstanding this concept of consent is harmful, and how power dynamics hugely sway what is actually consent. And it's so important that we understand how those things intersect because it encompasses so many important things such as personal safety, the prevention of abuse, and the cultivation of healthy relationships. Understanding the nuance of consent empowers individuals to set and respect boundaries, fostering a culture of mutual respect and equality. These conversations also play a vital role in professional settings and uphold legal and ethical standards. Ultimately, this discussion creates a foundation for safer and more respectful and equitable societies that values autonomy, communication, and the well-being of all individuals. So in this video, I will mostly be using the recent Lizzo lawsuit as an example of our misunderstanding of consent and our overlooking of power dynamic. This video is not going to get into guilt or innocence. I don't particularly care to focus on that for this conversation, but I am going to get into how lawsuits like this can actually be prevented if we had a deeper and better understanding of consent, if we fully understand how power dynamics affect decisions that people make, and how if you create better workplaces, these kind of incidents wouldn't happen, these kinds of lawsuits would not be filed. My hope is that by the end of this video, you will have a deeper understanding of consent, a deeper understanding of how power dynamics play in the workplace, and how if we do not have healthy relationships with either of these concepts, all work environments will continue to be hostile. Hi, my name is Queen. Welcome to the Mixed Vixen YouTube channel. Hey boo, if you are new here. If you are not new here, thanks for coming through again. I appreciate you. This Lizzo situation is a doozy. It revealed a lot of the parasocial relationships that people have. It revealed to me consent be fucking y'all up. Y'all don't know what it means. And it also has showed me that a lot of y'all don't understand power dynamics being in play and how no matter what, people with power are going to be harmful in the system of capitalism. And it's from people that I thought would get it. But, you know, whatever, we're all learning, we're all growing, and I'm not criticizing. Maybe I am a little bit, you know, it's Virgo season and I'm a Virgo. But let's get into the bare bones of what this Lizzo lawsuit is about, just in case you are the one person who just never heard of what's going on. According to The Guardian, 3 of Lizzo's tour dancers have accused the singer of sexual harassment and of creating a hostile work environment through sexual, racial, and religious harassment in several incidents between 2021 and 2023. So according to the lawsuit filed, the dancers also allege that Lizzo, who for most of us is known as an advocate for body positivity and self-love, criticized the dancers' recent weight gain and later berated, then fired that same dancer for recording a meeting. According to the lawsuit filed in Los Angeles, a lawsuit being filed in Los Angeles is a big thing. That is one of the most... I'll get into that later. Tangent, I'll circle back to why I'm saying that. Lizzo allegedly pressured one of her dancers to touch a new performer at a club in Amsterdam and subjected several dancers to an excruciating 12-hour audition after making false accusations that they drank while working. Additionally, the suit alleges that Lizzo's dance captain, Shirley Quigley, pushed her Christian beliefs upon other performers and denigrated those who had premarital sex while also simulating oral sex, sharing lewd sexual fantasies, and discussing one performer's virginity. I don't know why that's coming up, but okay, girl. So the lawsuit doesn't say whether Lizzo knew about Quigley's behavior or not, but the plaintiffs believe that she was aware. So there's no confirmation that she knew that of her employee, but this is why you need to check your team. That's why you need to check your team and see who's on your team, because it will land on you. I do want to add some new developments. As of this current recording, Lizzo now has plans to countersue. She's going to sue the backup dancers who are taking her to court. According to TMZ, a new photo appears to show her accusers having a great time backstage following some nude entertainment in Paris about a month after the infamous banana incident in Amsterdam. I'm not going to get into what that banana thing is, but the girls that get it, get it. Lizzo's attorney, Marty Singer, their attorney choice is very interesting. Their attorney is a lawyer who has defended many a predator. So it's an interesting choice of lawyer. But okay, we're not getting into legal stuff. We're keeping it about consent and boundaries and workplace stuff. So let me stay on track. So Marty Singer tells TMZ that this newly resurfaced photo of the accusers happily carousing and gleefully reveling backstage with the performers from the topless cabaret show in Paris during Lizzo's tour. So they feel that these photos are enough to show that they were fine with these types of shows, which is ridiculous and also just furthers my point of people not understanding power dynamics and understanding consent. But let me get back to this article, this TMZ article, just to get y'all all of the information. Singers say the photos are from March 5th, which is about a month after the infamously February visit to the banana bar in Amsterdam. So the attorney is saying that these photos contradict the claims. I'm assuming that they feel that if they were happy at one strip club, that they were happy at that. This doesn't make no sense. This is a horrible defense, but that's what you think is going to work, Lizzo? I guess. It makes no sense because consenting one time doesn't mean you consented every time. Saying yes once doesn't mean you said yes all the time. But like I said, I don't understand consent, and that's the point of this video. So before I get into all of the ins and outs of this case and my opinions on it, I do want to express some of my biases. So it's clear that regardless of the results of this case, Lizzo has been and will continue to be a target because she is a fat black woman. And I don't believe that the way in which all of this is coming down on her would have come down on her in this way if she was a white man. Like, that is just obvious. And I think she is mirroring the industry around her. This is how the music industry is. If you watch my last video about the Me Too movement not being anything resourceful for the women of hip hop, the music industry as a whole has not really been affected by the Me Too movement. For many people, this is just a Tuesday. This is how that business operates. And it's unfortunate that when it comes to the music business, it seems as though Lizzo is being the first one to pay for this. And it's because she is a flat black woman, that she would be the first person to kind of pay for this shift in how people navigate the entertainment space. People could not wait for this news to drop and to like dump all of their fat phobic rhetoric on her, to dump all of their misogynist rhetoric on her. And it's obvious because many people do not like her. I thought it was really weird that her boyfriend's ex just jumped in. It was just weird, some of the people jumping in to say things. There were folks who had valid things to say, who worked with her and had horrible experiences. So that I get. But that girlfriend, I guess, girl. I do enjoy Lizzo, but I'm far from a stan. And honestly, although I'm disappointed, I was not surprised by the allegations considering how the music industry runs. There has been no challenge, or no one has tried to establish new standards for how those kinds of workplaces exist. And most industries, just in general, are horrible workplaces for people. My background is also in HR, and I see firsthand, like, you will be shocked how quickly and easily people break EEOC laws. And they're not doing it with intention. They're not intentionally trying to be harmful people. They just do it because the standard of capitalism is to just get to the product. It's just really difficult to be ethical in capitalism. And being ethical in capitalism takes a lot of time and a lot of steps. And capitalism doesn't have the patience for that. So there's so many times I see people break EEOC laws and I gotta like curve that. I've seen the sweetest Most well-intentioned people take advantage of employees because that's just an intrinsic piece of capitalism. You want the product. You don't care about the people. You care about the product and what you're going to give. Capitalism is a very sturdy root of evil. And what I'm seeing with this Lizzo case and a lot of the chatter coming out of it, it has to do a lot with people not understanding consent and also not understanding power dynamics and how that comes into play. So in addition to this Lizzo lawsuit, remember when Cardi threw that microphone situation when she threw the mic? That was the first instance when I was like, damn, y'all really don't understand consent. We are still struggling with the concept of consent. And because of that, we've continued to harm people. Cardi threw her microphone in the crowd because they threw water on her. And no, not that time. This time. Then the video came out later of her asking people to wet her.
Bitch, I'm dying. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Tell me some water again, bitch, because I'm hot. And give me some water.
Splash her down. Give her some water. Splash her the fuck down.
Woo, that shit feel good. Put that shit in my pussy, bitch. Come on. Yeah, bitch.
And so many people was like,
see, she asked for it. She asked for it. She shouldn't have threw the mic. That's asking people to throw water at her.
And the key piece for that stuck out is that y'all don't understand that people can rescind consent. Just because I asked you to do something at one moment doesn't mean that 5 minutes later that I still am saying yes to that. So Cardi was telling them to throw water at her because it was hot. But then she starts rapping. I think she was rapping Bodak Yellow. She's not asking anyone to throw any water at her, and the person still threw water at her. That is not consent. But a lot of people understood that as consent because at one point she said throw water at me. Consent isn't an ongoing thing. And just because you said consent in one moment of time doesn't mean it continues. I'm hoping that you're getting what I'm giving. If you're not getting what I'm giving, I'm going to give you some definitions of consent. So Merriam-Webster defines consent as compliance with or approval of what is done or proposed by another. So that's a very basic definite understanding of consent that I think everyone is on. And I think that's what's fucking y'all up. So I'm going to go further in adding more language. Consent is a complex concept that can take various forms depending on the situations, context, and nature. Here are some different kinds of consent. So we have explicit consent. This is the most clear and direct consent form. It involves implicit verbal or written agreement where all parties involved clearly communicate their willingness to engage in specific activity. This type of consent leaves no room for ambiguity. So that is like the clear written yes, or you sign a signature on a consent form. Those are very clear, explicit expressions of consent. Then there's implied consent, and implied consent is assumed based on circumstances and context. It suggests that consent is granted through non-verbal cues, actions, or behaviors. For example, holding your hand out for a handshake can be seen as implied consent. Then we have informed consent. Informed consent is given when all parties involved have a full understanding of the nature, risk, benefits, and potential consequences of an action or decision. This form of consent is often used in medical and research contexts. Then we have enthusiastic consent. And enthusiastic consent emphasizes the importance of positive and enthusiastic agreement. It goes beyond mere compliance and ensures that all parties are genuinely excited and willing to participate in activity. Ongoing consent implies that consent can be withdrawn at any point during an activity, even if consent was given initially. Any participant has the right to stop or withdraw their consent if they become uncomfortable or change their mind. So keep those kinds of consent in mind as we continue to talk about things with Lizzo. Revocable consent. This type of consent can be revoked or withdrawn at any time. It emphasizes that consent is not one-time grant and can be taken back if someone no longer wants to engage in the activity. Affirmative consent, also known as yes, means yes. I think that's a consent that many of us are accustomed to, affirmative consent requires active and affirmative agreement from all parties involved before any activity takes place. It shifts the focus from the lack of refusal to the presence of clear, positive agreement. And then there are some forms of consent that people tend to take as consent, but they are not. So I just want to point out that these are not consent. And these are the interactions where you fall into a lot of the muddy waters, and why I think Lizzo fell into a lot of the things that these people are alleging in their lawsuit. Passive consent is given when a lack of objection or resistance is interpreted as agreement. This type of consent can be problematic as it relies on the assumption that silence implies consent, which might only sometimes be accurate. There's a lot of gray in that. Coerced consent, which to me obviously sounds harmful, but I'll get into what that is. Coerced consent occurs when one party pressures or manipulates another into agreeing to something against their will. This type of consent is not genuine or freely given, as one party uses power or influence to control the other. Inpacificated or incidental consent, this is obvious, but I'm saying it for the sake of putting it in the world. This is not a valid form of consent at all. It occurs when someone cannot fully understand the situation, such as due to intoxication or being under the influence. I would like to add a language barrier. Consent given under such circumstances is not considered legally or ethically valid. Now we understand there are different kinds of consent, and it exists in many different ways. It is not just a binary of yes and no. There are lots of nuance in consent. So now that we got through that, let's get into power dynamics, because I really think this is another piece that's y'all not really getting it. According to goodtherapy.org, power dynamics describe how power affects a relationship between two or more people. Power affects all aspects of social life, from the workplace to the home. Power is not inherently negative. For example, the ability of a parent to influence their toddler's actions can help keep them out of harm's way. Power dynamics refer to the interactions and relationships between individuals or groups where one party holds more influence or control or authority than the other. These dynamics often stem from differences in social, economic, or institutional positions, leading to imbalances in how decisions are made, resources are distributed, and actions are taken within leadership. I'm always a little taken aback when I see other marginalized peers in the, dismantling and liberation space still quite not understand power dynamics and how power creates access and how that greatly influences what people will say yes and no to. This is the section where I'm going to dig deeper into that. So power dynamics can manifest in various contexts, including professional relationships, workplaces, social settings, and broader societal structures. They can be explicit or subtle, but they generally influence the behavior choices and interactions of those involved. In some cases, power dynamics can be healthy and mutually beneficial. In others, they can lead to exploitation, manipulation, and abuse when used to control or dominate others. I think many of us have seen this happen in the workplace where, because of the power dynamic, there were certain things you were not comfortable saying no to, or, which, you know how that goes. So it was frustrating for me to see people not quite understand that, but I think it was the parasocial relationship that made it difficult for people to understand that is possible for that to exist. I also think because we are seeing a marginalized person kind of pay for something that we see so many white men get away with. I empathize with that as well, but that doesn't mean that they will not participate in unethical work practices. Like, it's very hard to genuinely, ethically have power in a capitalistic structure. And I think this is a very good example of that. So understanding power dynamics is crucial for creating healthy relationships in ethical environments, as it helps individuals recognize the impact of power imbalances on consent, communication, and overall well-being. Addressing power dynamics involves promoting open dialogue, respecting boundaries, and striving for fairness and equal participation in all interactions. So, there are a few examples of the impact of the power imbalance between Lizzo and her employees and how that impacted the consent for a lot of what was presented in this lawsuit. At the core of this lawsuit, for me, and what stuck out to me the most is this narrative of an unbalanced power dynamic. The situation with Lizzo, which I want to emphasize a million times in this video, is that it's not an isolated incident. And for many, even people who have worked in the music industry, this is light work. Although I'm using this as an example, I want to reflect that there's broader power dynamics at play that exist in the entertainment industry, period. Celebrities often hold considerable sway over their teams and employees, which can create an environment where abuse of power go unchecked. When a superstar as big as Lizzo holds significant influence over her team, there's a potential for the power to be misused or abused, either intentionally or unintentionally. Instances like this underscore the need for organizations and individuals to foster respectful, equitable work environments that prioritize the well-being of all involved and not just the goal of producing a great product. In an industry where the success and reputation of a star can overshadow the voices of those working behind the scenes, it is essential to address and rectify these power dynamics. As the lawsuit unfolds, it is crucial to remember that the focus should not solely be vilifying Lizzo. I think this is like the fifth time I've said this, or any other celebrity, but rather on addressing the systemic issue that allows such imbalances of power to persist. So how will this all lead to a horrible workplace? I'm looking at this from a lens of someone who works in HR. And I can tell you no workplace exists where they are not breaking the law or just any like regular ethical expectation. That's why most companies have an HR department. I think it's actually better to outsource your HR so it eliminates even more bias, but that's my personal opinion. But essentially, that arm of an organization is to make sure that you are not breaking laws and to prevent companies and entities from being sued. And I want to say that there's a big emphasis on making sure you don't get sued. Yes, I work in HR, and yes, I have the politic I have, but I'm still under a capitalistic structure. I generally try to make sure no one's breaking laws, because of course it's a safe place to work if no laws are being broken. But most HR, I'm not gonna front, rely on making sure they don't get sued, right? Let's be for real. And Lizzo needed HR real bad on her team, especially because this lawsuit happened in LA. California has some of the best labor laws in the country. Can't play with California when it comes to labor laws. Don't play with California when it comes to labor laws. And although people really sue their jobs when fired, because many people feel that these people were fired, so that's why they're suing. But the way that the EEOC and the Department of Labor work, the way they set up, is that if you sue your employer, you're more likely to win. One, because so many people don't do it because it takes a lot of time and people just want to just live your day by day. So I totally get it. But a lot of these cases are one because the work practices, the labor practices in this country are so horrible. Most workplaces do not have ways or do not have systems set in place to be able to prove in court that these are things they didn't do. I do not believe Lizzo will have any sound evidence to say that these aren't things that didn't happen. That's already obvious because they're entering for a countersuit with a picture that means absolutely nothing. But there's so many counts of unethical behavior that it's a bevy of stuff that the Department of Labor and EOC will just side with the folks who are suing. And that's why I say when it comes to HR, our job is to make sure we don't get sued. So all of those things, all of those policies and procedures are ways to prevent the company from getting sued. Lizzo don't got none of that. I'm sure there's no written standard as to how she leads her production company. And that's why all of these arbitrary things happened. Me personally, as HR, I would not fire someone because they spoke up after I said they were drinking on the job. That looks like retaliation. Retaliation is against the law. An employee is supposed to be able to speak up, not supposed to be a dictatorship. And this is one of those rare instances when people followed up and got a lawyer. This is one of those few instances where people did that, probably because Lizzo was a fat black woman and it's not as intimidating to sue a Lizzo versus suing random white man whose name I can't think of. So that's really the only difference that I think is happening here. Also, when it comes to the entertainment industry, people are used to being silent about working in these hostile work environments because we have been told that that's the way it is. If you want to work in that business, that's what it is. You will be harmed. People will treat you horribly. You will be exploited. You will feel used. It's a ridiculous norm to have, but that has been the norm that all of us have been okay with. That's why we love the movie The Devil Wears Prada. That's why we love when Diddy made the band walk from Midtown to Brooklyn to get cheesecake. We ate that shit up because we have been told that that is the norm, that those are the dues you pay to work in that business. And that shouldn't be the norm. And I think it's great that people are bucking up against the system and saying, like, nah, this is not how it's going to be. Usually when people step up like this, they're blacklisted. I'm sure that these women will probably never be able to work again. And that is not good. That's not a good thing. That is helpful for these exploitative capitalistic structures. I do think that the Me Too movement and also many of our changed relationship with the workplace and labor because of the pandemic is affecting how lots of people feel about being exploited at work. That's why there's a damn labor strike popping up every other week. We're not with the shits anymore. And I think that's a great thing. Is it unfortunate that Leo is Leo? Who's Leo? Lizzo is the first person we're seeing in the music industry get the brunt of this. It is unfortunate, but that is how white supremacist patriarchal structures work. The most marginalized is going to get penalized in that structure first. Be it on tour, be it a music video, the studio, these are workplaces, and there's a shift in making people in these industries see it as such. We're in the workplace. Why are we going to the strip club? Why do I have to feel that I have to participate in certain things in order for me to thrive here? In a workplace with an unhealthy consent culture, like so many in the entertainment industry, there are no well-defined policies or proper trainings around issues of harassment, discrimination, and simple things like respectful behavior. Employees are left unaware of what is considered appropriate behavior, leading to confusion and potential misconduct. Not having a healthy consent culture and these imbalances of power can lead to workplaces that look like what seems to be alleged by the folks who filed the lawsuit against Lizzo. Here are common power imbalances that, according to the lawsuit, existed, which I think if work was done to make sure they didn't exist in the workplace, Lizzo wouldn't be in the predicament that she is in right now. It was clear that individuals consistently ignored personal boundaries in this environment, and the way that manifested was invading people's personal space. So I believe that they either took someone's phone or locked someone in a hotel room while they looked through their phone to delete pictures, making inappropriate comments. The lack of respect for personal boundaries contributes to discomfort and hostile atmosphere. Pressure to attend social events. This is always an issue for me when it comes to work. It's just not conducive for me. I'm also pretty antisocial. Employees may feel pressure to attend social events the company organizes, even if they're uncomfortable participating. This definitely happened with Lizzo's people. They also say in a lawsuit that they felt that if the people who went to a lot of the events with Lizzo were more liked and treated better. Obvious, the whole sex club thing was a weird social event to bring their staff to. Dismissal of concerns. So they do say that when they would bring up their concerns that they felt not heard, a lot of the things were dismissed. And there wasn't really a responsiveness when they did bring up issues. And then there was that retaliation thing. So if they did bring up issues, they were penalized for it. I believe they were accused of being intoxicated while working. And the punishment for that was an extensive 12-hour rehearsal or workout or whatever. That doesn't sound like a sound way to correct that behavior. What was Lizzo and them doing? Oh my gosh. I fire people for a living and I have no issue firing people because if you can't do the job, you can't do the job. But everyone here needs to be fired. What the heck? There was obvious unequal power structures. Very obvious that there was a power imbalance, which I get because Lizzo was a star, but I think that there should have been things set in place for checks and balances so that that didn't exist in the culture, everyone that was on that tour. Yeah. They needed checks and balances. They needed someone, not just one sole person influencing the culture of how they work. It seems as though a lot of these people felt manipulated or coerced into some of the decisions that they made while working on this team, allegedly. And it's just unhealthy. If you don't think you can say no, if you don't think you can object to things, that leads to a really unsafe work environment. There also seems to be a blurred line between professional and personal boundaries, which is always a huge no for me. I do not like seeing those types of things in workplaces. Just inappropriate comments or behaviors that crosses the line between personal and professional relationships. Why are we talking about religion at work? What does that have to do with dancing? Right? You're a choreographer, girl. What does it have to do with dancing? So blurring that personal and that professional line is never safe. That's also why I loathe the idea of we are a family. I don't ever utter that around me in any workplace, ever. Because we are not a family. We're at work and we're exchanging money for labor. This is not family. That's not how families work. That's not how family structures work. And any workplace that tries to create a family structure in the workplace is expletive. Get out. They are grooming you to abuse you. And there seems to be a huge lack of accountability. It seems as though the only person who could be wrong is the employee, and the employer is just always right. That's never safe. Anyone, perpetrators might not face consequences for their actions, which seems the case, especially with the choreographer, Miss Quigley. As when these allegations came out, she went on TikTok and like released a prayer or something. It's just, I don't know, weird. I think because there was no one in the team that made sure to keep the work environment ethical and within the confines of LA employment laws, there was no checks and balances. And to the root of it, most of us do not know how to like be a manager or lead a team and understand how what might seem like a normal, not so serious thing to you can actually be horrible in the workplace. Another thing that was huge was that this fear of retaliation that I think they instilled in everyone. I'm sure that them firing those employees said something for the other people who were on the team. It doesn't mean that they enjoyed being on the team. I think there was another video of one of the accusers and had a video of her saying how she enjoyed it, and it's like, are we not understanding the power dynamics? Have we not learned anything from people who have been abused, who tell you that they thought that that was normal? These type of unethical work environments are things you can be groomed into thinking is okay and normal. Obviously, this is alleged because I wasn't there and I was working there, but based on my experience, it seemed like the lack of respect for personal boundaries, unequal power dynamics, and a disregard for the employees contribute to an atmosphere where harassment and abuse are likely to occur. And based on these allegations, it seems like it did. So it's important to recognize these signs and work towards healthier and more respectful workplace cultures. Those are all the thoughts that I had, but I wanted to conclude this with reflecting on our attitudes towards consent and interrogating what you think that means, interrogating that there is nuance with consent. It's not a binary. Consent is not just a yes, no thing, and that's it. And also consider how power dynamics influence people's decisions. If someone with power has more access, they have more influence and are more likely to get people who appear to be consenting to things, but it's because they have more power and access, and the person with the least amount of power is trying to get some proximity to that access. So we should be better at challenging these norms, challenging these work norms. Ask questions. Why are things the way they are? Can we create our own industry standard? That's one thing that I have had a hard time with being an independent creator, and why I probably will be an independent creator throughout this whole creative life of mine, is so many people think that that's just the way it is and they'll just go with the flow of that. People just rely on the fact that, well, that's just the way it is, and we have to challenge these norms, especially because we live in a capitalistic structure. We contribute to the unethical practices that inherently exist in capitalism when we just kind of just let things exist the way they exist and don't challenge the system and don't buck up against the system. It is great that employees, laborers, are speaking up. This is a great thing. This is an amazing thing. Is this unfortunate for Lizzo? Definitely. Would I prefer this be happen to someone else? No question. But we have a very serious problem when it comes to the relationship between the employee and the employer. And this was a glaring, very obvious to me issue that I noticed was not so glaringly obvious to everyone else. So that's why I made this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it to the end of the video, put a thumbs up emoji in the comments. I want to thank my patrons. You keep this going. I appreciate you all so much. For as low as $2 a month, you can get extras, exclusive content if you join our Patreon. Remember, you are a bad bitch. You are enough. Stay fly. I will see you in the next video.